there are various delegations at various levels, some of them at head of state level, head of government level, but also, as you saw with the United States, at a very, shall we say, lower level in terms of representation that they are asking, saying that they will not be participating in the deliberations in the main summit, but they are sending a low-level delegation that they say will take part in the handover of the presidency of the G20 at the close of the summit. And the pushback was swift from the South African government. The presidency spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, tweeting out and saying that South Africa, the president, will not be handing over to a charge d'affaires of the United States, the G20 presidency, because this is at a leader's level. All right, let's make sense of it all. I'm joined by Brook Spector, diplomat of many, many years of standing, but now practices his craft in providing us with insights into this world of diplomacy. Brooks, thank you for coming through.
Sure.
I suppose let me start there, around the G20 Leaders Summit. Why is it so dramatic? You expect that where there is a summit of this nature at a heads of state and government level, a declaration is only natural, but it seems there's a lot of contention about this one.
Part of the problem, or part of the challenge, is when you have heads of government who don't agree with the objectives of the discussion, you're going to have this difficulty. And as we have seen, the Trump administration has taken a particular annoyance at South Africa generally, but also I think Donald Trump really doesn't like international conferences or multilateral gatherings. You saw the way over the years he has responded to UN meetings. You saw the way he has responded to other kinds of summits, the NATO summits, for example, which are ostensibly among allies. He does not like the idea that the decision must be made among many nations and obviously many people, rather than diktat from himself towards others. And in this particular summit, in this particular case, the goals that were set out by Cyril Ramaphosa at the beginning of his tenure as president of the G20 seemed to run counter to the way in which Donald Trump thought the United States government should be operating. And you see this in all manner of different disciplines and discussions. And as a result, the decision was made Donald Trump would not come, but the vice president would, J.D. Vance. And then you saw J.D. Vance wasn't going to come, and the U.S. would sit out entirely, ultimately saying, well, the charge d'affaires ad interim, which simply means the man who is the most senior person in an embassy, absent an ambassador.
Because the ambassador is yet to arrive.
Correct. And that he would represent the U.S. government at the handover moment, the handshake, or however they do this, and he would bring a small delegation from his embassy as support. And that elicited a rather firm pushback from the South African government that no, we don't do it this way. And so that's where we stand now. And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward too, because the final joint declaration or statement of notes by the chair, whichever it turns out to be, will not be incorporating American positions or viewpoints because they won't have been part of the discussion.
I want to turn to the final declaration, the distinction between a declaration and a statement by the chair in a moment. But I want to first explore with you the comments coming out of the White House, the press secretary at the White House, and I have to quote them, Brooks, that I saw the South African president running his mouth off a bit against the U.S. president, and those words are not appreciated by the President of the United States. What President Cyril Ramaphosa said in giving an account about the request of the U.S., which request we now know actually has happened, in that the diplomatic note has been released and it's out and circulating, saying assist us by accrediting and facilitating the participation at the close of the summit of these officials.
Yeah.
What about that amounted to running his mouth off?
Well, I think several things happened. The note you're referring to is, in diplomatic terms, is a note verbal, which is a non-formal. It's not like a declaration of war or something like that. It's a sort of a standard operating memo, government to government. Please assist us in the following things, X, Y, and Z. I think what happened was that somewhere along the way, it was less than clear to Ramaphosa when he made comments, and that elicited from him a less than cheerful response, which then in turn elicited from Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, the kinds of words that you don't expect to come from the White House press spokesman. Let's put it that way. That was uncalled for. And in a normal administration, she might have been taken back and say, let's have a word about this. That obviously has not happened, because that's the way she has been told that she must respond to these things. And so now we're left with the idea that the request for an 8-member delegation from the embassy, the chargé d'affaires plus 7 other people, sort of standard operating procedure, not at the level of a head of government or head of state certainly, but the highest ranking American in country. That note verbal requesting accreditation, I don't know yet whether that accreditation's actually even been granted, which is a question that I hope your reporters find out.
Sure.
Because that will tell us a little bit more. Now, the thing about it that makes it particularly awkward is that the handover is supposed to go to the United States because they're the host next year.
Yes.
And in the meantime, President Trump has said he thinks, and his Secretary of the Treasury, they think that the gathering as it is now constituted is too big. There are too many people who come, too many heads of government, and maybe South Africa shouldn't even be invited by virtue of its size and its economy. And that obviously was not meant to calm the waters, shall we say. That was meant to sort of rough things up a little bit.
Yeah. So let's talk then about what South Africa does with this moment. Firstly, just the significance of it. Is it possible that we're playing it up more than what it is in terms of its significance of hosting the first G20 Leaders Summit on the African continent, in terms of now the substance beyond the form and on all these other debates?
Funny you should say that. My wife told me to say that.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Form over substance. Yeah. Your wife is a wise woman.
She said, well, no, I
should always listen to her.
I should. What she did say to me was, you need, as in me, speaking on behalf of all the other people in journalism, you folks need to focus more on the substance and less on this dickering for, who's going to push first. And in a way, I think she's right, that it's now time to focus rather more intently on the content of the discussions between the leaders and the content of a joint declaration or a joint final communique, or simply the chair's notes of discussion. The notes of discussion would indicate that there wasn't full agreement. And remember that the terms of engagement for the G20 is all participating governments have to agree unanimously on the content of the final declaration. So if there's one dissenting voice that says, wait a minute, I don't agree with this, then it can't be a joint declaration. Then it becomes the chair's notes of our meeting.
And that has happened in the past, hasn't it?
It has. It can, because there are legitimately serious disagreements. I mean, just for example, you could have an impasse between fossil fuel producing nations and countries that feel deeply worried over the change in climate because of the carbon dioxide and other chemicals that enter the air that produce global warming and therefore leading to climate change. That could be a disagreement. There could be a disagreement on the way in which tariffs are adjudicated. There could be a disagreement on a whole host of things, which is one reason why you have meetings like this.
In Brazil, the debate was about a wealth tax. It ended up being about that. Let me ask you something else, Brooks, about we've seen a number of heads of state not making it to South Africa. So your Xi Jinping, for example, Donald Trump and Javier Milei I would say, the exception, because
put that example aside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we talk about the others. The Russian president, there's that particular issue to do with the ICC.
Yes, he really can't travel.
He really can't, especially to South Africa. But
because there were some awkward moments with the former president of Sudan, if you remember.
I remember that. And you would have thought then that the Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, would be here, but
there was some tension between Lavrov and Putin, I have been told.
Okay, interesting story for another day. But the point I'm asking, Brooks, is it out of the ordinary that you would have, because there's a lot of heads of state arriving. Let's be
many
about
people.
that.
I mean, just look at the flags behind us. Many of those flags represent countries in which the head of government is coming.
Yeah, is it out of the ordinary that you would have so many that say, I can't make it?
Well, I mean, part of the problem for some of them, they may have domestic issues that they really must attend to, or they may have previous commitments that precede this thing, because it is a long distance to come from some countries to here, and it eats up time, or they may simply be so consumed with their precarious hold on power that absenting themselves for days on end is awkward. But there is something to be said about the question of whether or not this kind of meeting should continue forever into the future. And I'm strongly of the opinion that it is time, or close to the time certainly, where much of this could be held vicariously through online conferencing.
Yeah.
Businesses do this increasingly because people's time is valuable. Now the equipment, the capabilities are so good that it really is possible. And during COVID, after all, remember, meetings took place that way.
Yeah.
So I think there's room for discussion in the future about whether or not it's necessary to have all these heads of government converging with the enormous number of staff that show up with them, with all the hangers-on from business and civic organizations and the media and all the caterers and chefs and police and everything else, and the traffic jams.
Yeah. Brooks, do you mind if I detain you for a little bit longer? I'm sure your wife would agree. Brook Spector. The reason I paused my conversation there with Brooks is because I want to take you to Calvin Dludla, part of the team that we've deployed that is monitoring the logistics and the traffic flows and the work that has been put in, behind the scenes in terms of ensuring that there's smooth running of this Leaders Summit. But as I do that, I do want to point out that we are on standby for the arrival of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who will be arriving anytime now, and we have our eyes fixated on Air Force Base Waterkloof, and we will talk a bit more with Brook Spector about that. There you are. We show you the visuals from Waterkloof Air Force Base, where the Indian Prime Minister will be arriving any minute now. Calvin Dludla, where are you at the moment, and where do we find you in relation to the logistics, the flow of traffic, and the control and security that is the ring of steel, as it were, that has gone up around various parts of Gauteng to secure the G20?
Good afternoon to you and to our SABC viewers at home. We're still here at the Johannesburg Expo Center, known as Nasrec to many. Earlier I did mention that the name Nasrec or Johannesburg Expo Center is a name that is famous in Africa, in South Africa and the world, because this is when the global affair, the global event is taking place. I'm talking about the much talked about, the much anticipated global summit that is taking place. It will be taking place on Saturday and Sunday. Our job is very simple, is to monitor traffic flows to and from the venue. Earlier when we came here, we had a live crossing with a morning live where we were inside a shuttle. The reason why I'm mentioning that is just that I want to remind our viewers about the logistical issues here at Nasrec. It's not your normal day where you can just come in with your private car and go wherever you are around this vicinity. you have to park your car in a certain place, and then you have to take a shuttle, and then that shuttle will have to take you to the gate where police officers will have to search you. You have to introduce your card, your accreditation, then you will be permitted or you will be allowed to get inside. For now, I have to tell you that the traffic is flowing. I don't know if Stelo, our video journalist, because we are on top of the van, he can be able to show you the traffic flow. There are police officers that are here. Earlier I did mention that police officers mentioned that they have deployed almost 3,500 police officers here so that they can be able to monitor the situation and enforce law. What I noticed though is that there are even police officers or law enforcers from outside the province of Gauteng. I saw two police vans from Limpopo province, the public order policing known as POP. They are also here assisting or beefing up security. The situation is still calm here. We are expecting delegates to come, as I have seen that His Excellency from India is also coming now to South Africa. He has landed at the OR Tambo International Airport. He will be able to make his way here because the summit, the much talked about summit, is starting over the weekend. You would remember that there were those who were doubting that South Africa can be able to host such a global and a magnificent event. But as you can see, Stelo penning in, maybe he can be able to go back to Soccer City. The reason why Stelo is going to that Soccer City, it's because this is not the first time South Africa is holding such a global showpiece. It did in 2010, successfully so, when they hosted this global sporting event. Now, this Soccer City that hosted the World Cup is not far from where the global summit will be hosted. That is your Nazareth. The situation is calm here. Stelo will be showing you some police officers there. The situation is being monitored closely. Operations are not the same, I have to say. There are a lot of police officers here, even traffic officers. You would see that there are also canine, those who are riding on horses and those who are on foot. A lot of police officers making sure that this event is successful. But because of time, back to you in studio.
The news team tracking developments in and around South Africa's hosting of the G20 Summit. We are on standby for the arrival of the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, who will be arriving any minute now at Vatekloof Air Force Base. Let me bring in Brook Spector before we release you, Brooks. Just your take on the Global South dynamic of the G20, the BRICS dynamics of the G20, the IBSA dynamic of the G20, because this is Prime Minister Modi's 12th G20 summit since 2014, and in his departure statement yesterday coming out of New Delhi, he spoke about the importance of the summit and talking about that it falls in line with India's vision of one Earth, one family, one future. That is the statement that he made, and saying that, you know, it has its own significance and that the African Union joining and becoming a part of the G20 happened during India's own presidency of the G20 in 2023. So it's been a streak of 4 presidencies that come from the Global South, starting from Indonesia to South Africa, with the other 2 countries in between. Is that significant?
It is and it isn't. The reason why I say it is because it represents countries that, say, 50 years ago would not have been central to a discussion. Brazil would not have been a country that everyone would have taken enormous cognizance of, except as an exporter of raw materials and fine music, say. Indonesia, something of the same order. But these are countries now that are bigger in economic terms and therefore more impactful. But one of the things that Prime Minister Modi is hinting at is that India is trying to take its place as a leading world power, not as a world power, not as a leader of the South, but as a world power generally. I mean, it is already the largest country in terms of population. head of China, actually. Although its economic strength is not yet at the same level, it does have enormous impact in certain industries, not the least of which are in IT and high-tech areas. And as a result, the Indians are putting an enormous amount of attention in building on those strengths, rather than simply saying we are going to lead the impoverished nations of the world.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be said of China, that 50 years ago, China was a country in which the per capita income was very low. And it was coming out of the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, which did not leap forward. And now it is a country that is, by most measures, the second biggest economy in the world, second number in population, and a leader in many of the important, crucial high-tech sectors that the rest of the world makes use of or wishes to. And so I think the argument has to be reframed a little bit away from developed versus less developed nations, and much more to the kinds of things that many nations participate in.
Yeah, because part of the framing in the G20 certainly has to do with economic significance, doesn't it? In that these are economies that, no matter what you think of their politics and ideological leanings, they are of such significance that a shock in one of these countries has an impact certainly at the regional level and possibly at a global level.
If you remember back at some years ago, 20-some years ago, the collapse of a large investment firm based in part in the then so-called third world was one of the key impetuses for creating the G20 in the first place.
Yeah.
And the argument was even the G8, then eventually G7, was insufficient to begin to take into account all of the major economic choices and troubles. And so the G20 was born out of that recognition.
Yeah. So lastly then, let me ask you about the moment for countries that are seeking to take their place as leaders, global leaders. You mentioned India, some would say China, and others. In this moment where we've seen the United States pulling back, certainly at the multilateral level, in the manner that has happened now, does this present a moment that the world, there were comments that were made by Minister Ronald Lamola a couple of days ago about the world will need to move on, with or without the United States?
Well, I think he's being sort of over-exaggerating the circumstances. Yeah. Part of the reason I say that is, although the Donald Trump administration may be trying to pull away from international cooperation in a variety of ways, the economic heft of the United States, its cultural heft, its political and its military weight, still argue for every country on the globe paying attention to the U.S. Not necessarily giving it a kiss on the forehead, but certainly paying close attention to it. And that's because of all those factors combined. And the U.S. has gone through periods of decline before it. I've had this discussion with other people. If you were to have talked about the United States in 1975, 76, this was just after the collapse of the effort in Vietnam. The country had been divided deeply by that war. There were major struggles over civil and human rights within the country. And there was a feeling that the country was on its inevitable course of decline.
Yeah.
That was then, this is now.
So it's not pandering, but it's reckoning with the reality of the significance of the United States.
Reality matters.
Yeah. All right, Brooks, I've got to thank you for your time. Brook Spector, Associate Editor at Daily Maverick, but also an analyst of international affairs of many, many years of standing.